Welcome everyone. We will be starting here pretty soon. I hope folks have been enjoying the summit pretty well today. There was a lot of interesting information and a lot of interesting sessions, and this one will be even better. We have a very dynamic session with a dynamic speaker today with lots of information. So I hope you have your keyboards and pieces of paper. Take notes as you go. In today's session, we will focus on several key points. We are returning to the topic of AI, and we will learn how to foster a healthy relationship with technology in our classrooms. Also, how to help students develop AI literacy, and really how to balance AI with the human element of learning. Mike will be addressing kind of across disciplines, teaching students in high school, at higher ed level, no matter what stage you're at and what kind of students you're teaching. I think this session will have a lot of information for you. Mike is an award-winning educator teaching English, and he has more than 15 years of experience in both teaching and journalism. He is currently leading an AI exploration program and will be developing a self-directed learning program for high school students leveraging AI technology. You will see there is a poll running, so feel free to vote. A few reminders. If you need captioning for this session, you can find that at the bottom of the Zoom screen. We also have the chat and the Q&A box available if you want to ask Mike any questions. I encourage you to learn from Mike, but also learn from each other. So feel free to share insights in the chat and ask questions. And we have a room full of teachers, so feel free to learn from everyone. Mike, welcome and have a great session.
Thank you, Lale. I appreciate that. Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Kentz, as Lale said. I'm a teacher in Savannah, Georgia, and I'm going to be presenting something that I like to call Stop Grading Essays, Start Grading Chats. And this is very much focused on adapting assessment for the age of AI. But it does a lot more than that. As Lale said, we're also going to get into how it develops AI literacy and fosters a healthy relationship with technology. Look at these survey results. It looks as if most people here 77% of the people in this room believe that assessment with AI is definitely very important, but must be done in tandem with other changes. And I have to say, I agree with that assessment as well. I'm in one of the first two options here for this survey. I believe that assessment changes are probably one of the biggest changes that we need to make to adapt to the age of AI. So, if you're wondering, that's kind of where I'm coming from in terms of this change. So, our agenda, we're going to start by talking about why we need to shift our assessment mindset for the age of AI. I'm going to walk you through periodically some case studies that I did this year in my classroom. I'm going to walk you through the steps and procedures that I think are important if you are going to put AI in front of your students. And then I'm going to engage with you, ask you your feedback, and we're going to collaborate with each other a little bit here and there as we go through some of my student feedback, some of their chat transcripts that I pulled from the case studies, the experiments that I ran this year. So, without further ado, I'm going to move to the next slide, and I'm going to start with just the basic question. Why grade the chats? Well, as many of you, I think, have realized or experienced this year in the classroom, our traditional assessments are very much either irrelevant or a lot less relevant than they used to be if students can use AI, which means that we need to, in my opinion, shift our assessment focus to look more closely at the process of learning rather than our traditional output. So that's what this assessment focus is going to do. It's going to focus on the process of learning. As we said earlier, teaching effective AI use, I think, is one of the most important things that we can do for our students, any level. I think starting around middle school, high school, and university level, we really need to make sure that students are not blind believing what they get from AI, that they understand how to leverage it, but also what the risks and dangers are. And grading their chat transcripts and giving them feedback on how they actually use AI, in my opinion, is the best way to do that. It's the same thing as giving feedback on an essay. We're going to constantly let them know what is responsible use, what's effective use, and what's not. I also think we need to shift our investment mindset because I think we need to learn from the past mistakes that the education essentially industry made with digital learning and social media use over the last 25 years. I think that generally speaking, we could have done a better job teaching students how to engage with internet produced with information produced on the internet or social media in healthier ways. I hope that we've learned from that, and I hope that this assessment method kind of builds on that idea. Um, I also want to say that grading stats achieves a couple of other things that I didn't have on that slide. One of them is it actually navigates around AI cheating in a way. AI cheating is this very big issue, right? How do we deal with the fact that if we assign something to be done at home and they submit it, we actually have no idea, technically, whether or not they used AI, how much they used it, or how they used it. So my approach to that problem is not only to allow the AI use, but to require. We're going to require that they have to use it for a specific section of the assessment, and we're going to tell the students, I want to see you using it in X, Y, and Z ways. It's different for every objective, different for every content, and I'm going to grade your interaction. And that tells our students assessments are a communication mechanism. When we decide what to assess, we are communicating to our students what we care about the most. And so as we go through this, I would ask you to consider what are we saying to our students when we maybe when we're using AI and we don't assess that, when we don't actually look at that. We're basically saying to them that this isn't that big of a deal. You can kind of use it how you want. Here are my ideas, but I don't know. And so for me, assessments are a communication mechanism, and we need to let them know we care about how they use AI. Additionally, this is going to develop AI literacy. It's going to develop critical thinking and creativity. You can also assess the content understanding from their interactions with the chat. It's honestly amazing. And I think when we get to the student artifacts, you'll see some of what I mean. But not least, I also want to say this preserves the role of the teacher. There have been a lot of concerns about is AI going to replace the teacher? And I think the images I'm about to show illustrate kind of spatially how I think we as teachers need to live in the learning process. So the traditional role of the teacher looks a little bit like this. If we're teaching our student how to drive a boat, they're generally standing next to us, behind us. We're demonstrating, we're modeling, we're lecturing, whatever method you want to focus on. We're the ones that are generally doing it and teaching it, and then eventually they're going to step in and we're going to watch and evaluate. Well, AI is fairly powerful and it can actually help with some of these tasks. So the new role of the teacher in my mind looks a little bit like this. Sitting at the control panel, you have this student. Now, this is, by the way, this is not all the time. Okay, this does not for content delivery. This is not for every assessment. But in certain cases where AI is quite powerful, AI is going to essentially be the direct coach of the student and the student will be at the control panel. You as the teacher, I think right now a lot of people have been focusing on evaluating AI's effectiveness, and that's fine. But what we should be doing is evaluating our students' effectiveness. Are they asking the right questions? Are they critically reviewing what the bot has to say? And I'll point out real quick, just a perfect example of AI being a little bit difficult to use. I could not, for the life of me, get this robot in this picture to turn around. He is, and maybe he is facing forward. I don't really know what's going on here, but I kept trying to prompt AI to turn that bot around. I couldn't do it. And another kind of analogy that I would use is if you look out into the ocean in this picture, you see a giant tanker coming at us. Now, there are going to be situations when our students are using the bot, and the student says, "What do I do?" And the bot says something inaccurate, like "Keep going straight." We need to be there in those moments to say, and hopefully our student is smart enough and they have enough domain expertise that they're able to say, no, 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 that's not the right thing to do. AI, you need to step back. I'm taking over now, right? Practical judgment, practical wisdom on the student to recognize when AI doesn't know what it's talking about. But you got to be there too, and you got to be evaluating both the student and the overall output from there. All right. So what? Okay, cool. Great idea. Great visual. Uh, maybe this makes sense to you, but you're probably sitting asking yourself, how? How do you actually grade a chat transcript? And how do you even teach effective AI use in the first place? Are we even really clear on what that is yet? Well, I think we're clear enough. I think we're clear enough to start. And if we don't start soon, we could end up in deeper trouble if we wait. But here is the process that I ran in my classroom this year, and you can see an infographic on the right side. It's a little bit too small of print, but you can find that on my website and on my Substack. But here are the 5 steps. Okay? You're going to start by teaching your principles for effective AI use. You're going to tell them what you want to see them do. Then you're going to have them generate AI purpose statements. I'll talk about that in a second. But they've got to outline what the goal is by using AI in general. Then they will interact with AI for an assessment grade. They'll produce the traditional assessment output. And then step 5 is to actually have them produce a reflection from using the AI tool. How effective was it? Why? Why not? How did I use it? Etc. I'm going to get into more detail as we go along. Now, I'm going to start with step 1. Step 1, again, principles for effective AI use. Jury is a little bit out on this. And right so far, the idea of AI literacy or effective use has kind of boiled down to prompt engineering. But we're starting to find a universe of principles that we can actually use to teach our students this is the way we should think about large language models. So I've got a couple here that I think are really strong. Number 1, resist the urge to leverage AI to do work faster or easier, and instead leverage AI intentionally in order to produce better work. If we're telling our students before they use AI to follow this principle, that's going to be the type of thing that we're grading when we read the chat transcript. Number 2, ask for suggestions and options, not answers or opinions. AI doesn't know anything or have any opinions. It's going to tell you what you want to hear or predict what it thinks is the best response, even if it doesn't know. So don't ask for answers from AI. Don't ask for opinions. It doesn't have one. Instead, ask for suggestions, and then you decide whether or not they're actually good. Number 3, never let a device do your thinking for you. I'm sure everybody in this room agrees with that. Reflect critically on what AI produces, and then constantly ask what, why, and how. And make sure I don't bury the. I'm gonna make sure I don't front run myself because I've got a couple of slides on the what, why, how approach that come a little bit later in the presentation. But those 3 questions are crucial to a responsible, effective AI use. Now, okay, so I've got my principles, but how do I actually do this with them? How do I actually get them to understand it? Well, working with a large language model is a reading and writing skill, which means that we need to apply English language arts pedagogical approaches to the teaching of AI literacy. How do you do that? Well, if you're an English teacher, you probably know exactly where I'm going with this. We're going to use close reading, and we're going to replace the traditional text with the chat transcript. We're going to give them exemplars, non-exemplars, sort of exemplars, and we're going to have them analyze a fictional conversation between an AI user and a bot and have them actually decide what is good, what's not good, why, all following your rubrics and your principles for effective use. You can also model, first put it up on the screen, show them what it looks like, show them what good use looks like, show them what bad use looks like, provide examples. And one thing that I did in both of my experiments this year is I gave them a practice round beforehand so that they could get a little bit comfortable. Now I'm going to toss it to you because I'm talking now for 15 straight minutes. And this, what I have in front of you right now is the exemplar and the non-exemplar that I put in front of my students. And I didn't tell them which was good or which was bad. So I'm going to actually ask you guys to take a second and decide which one is the exemplar, student X or student Y. All right. And so I think Lale is going to put that into the chat. I'll let you guys read and take a second and decide. You can also raise your hand if you want to come off mute. Just to be clear, this question in the chat, when I say exemplar, I mean the best version of using AI. So exemplar is like the model, what we would want to see our students doing. And a non-exemplar is the opposite. It's what we don't want to see our students doing. I see a lot of folks going with student X. Is there anybody who wants to come off mute and explain really quickly why they chose X? Well, I see people pointing out specific examples, and student X is significantly more. Um, That's a good point. Research is process, absolutely. In this case, yeah, you're right. Make a plan is not the worst thing in the world. However, there really aren't very specific directions in here. And so, at least for what I was asking my students to do, and you're right, there's some context that's missing here, and I can't give you all the information from the case study. But for what I asked them to do, I told them to provide a lot of context beforehand. So student X is actually effectively using AI, a little bit more effectively using AI by giving a lot of background and saying, here's the situation, here's where you are at, AI, here's what I need you to do, and then goes through all of the specifics of what it's looking for. So when I did this in the classroom, this was the moment of all the different ways that I tried to teach effective AI use. This was the moment where my students understood it the most, when they actually got to view a good version and a not so good version. So I'm going to jump to the next slide now. And another really important part of this process is to create feedback loops. Similar to if you're a writing teacher, you understand that with essays, we know they're not going to get it perfect the first time, but if we continue to give them feedback over and over and over again as an iterative process, they're going to get better. And the same is true with using a language model. They're not going to get it the first time. It's going to take a couple of iterative efforts to really get them to figure out the art rather than a science. And so I have an example piece of feedback that I gave to one of my students. Um, in this particular situation, I had a student, sorry, I had to look at something really quick. I had a student who was basically just asking AI to do the work for him. And so the feedback that I gave him was be more specific and not to basically hand over the reins of the entire thinking process and say, go ahead and make this for me, make that. And so I told him it feels like ChatGPT knows us because it's responding so quickly and it seems to get pretty close to answering the question that we have. But we cannot hand over the decision-making process. It can help us, but we cannot let it direct. So this is just an example of one of the pieces of feedback that I gave my students to help them better understand how to use large language models. Now, the second step of this assessment framework is that teachers actually need to generate purpose statements before going into this process. So I have Leon Fersey's AI assessment scale. Some of you may be familiar with it or not. I would highly recommend checking it out. It's a really interesting way of thinking about when to put AI in front of your students, when not to. And another way of thinking about this is to ask yourself, what's my objective in this particular assessment? Why might AI be helpful? Why is it not helpful? This is a process that's going to be very specific to your content and your objective, and also to the section of the assessment. And the last question is, how will this augment student outcomes? Now, after you have figured out, okay, I actually think AI could help my students with brainstorming or outlining or editing or whatever it may be, then, oh, okay, I forgot I had this here. Really quickly, what, if any, type of assessment would you feel comfortable allowing your students to use AI? And if the answer is none, I'm totally okay with that. But are there any folks who have ideas in their mind? I think my students could benefit from using AI for this particular task. Okay, I see brainstorming, ideation. That's how I used it. I let my students use it as a brainstorming partner, finding a research topic. developing a business plan. A lot of these are very, yep, okay. Revising too, absolutely interesting. These are all great. These are all great. Thank you for your engagement here. I see Kaylee says structured brainstorming, outlining research plans, but not the end copywriting itself. I think that makes a lot of sense. AI is a great thought, right? It's a great like friend that you can bounce ideas off of and ask for more information on something. But it's I don't know if really um, it's an okay writer. I know some people think it's a very good writer, but it's sometimes it really falls short. You when you need something creative or you need a really thorough narrative. But it can help with revising, you know. And the point that I think we're seeing here in the chat is that it's a section of the assessment, right? It's not the whole thing. Generally speaking, we want to use it for a section of the assessment. Um, and by doing that, we're confining the parameters ultimately of the chat transcript we're going to grade. And so that's how let me get into that for in a second. Now, after you have figured out your purpose and why you are going to put AI in front of students in the first place, you're going to have them do the same thing. They need to answer what is the project objective? What is the goal of the AI use? Why do I think AI will help? And what I found was actually kind of a fun piece of this is that some students were saying to me, no, I have no idea why AI will help. You're basically telling me it will help, Mr. Kent's, but I don't fully understand why. And I said, okay, I understand that. You used it very much yet. So make predictions. Take a guess based on what you know, based on what your teacher has told you, based on what you under the project, make a prediction. This is a reading skill, right? We do this when we teach literature. If you're reading a book, make a prediction on what you think the characters are going to do. Same type of thought process. And then the last question, how will this augment the quality of my project? Same idea. If they're not sure, make a prediction. Hopefully they have an idea, but if they don't know, make a prediction. By setting up the purpose statement, it's going to help the reflection a lot towards the end. Now, when your students actually use AI, you're going to want to give them a rubric beforehand. I have built and used this rubric that you see in front of you um, for my students, and I broke it out into four criteria. One is engagement quality, and some of this text may be too difficult to see directly, but engagement quality essentially has to do with are you leveraging it to its fullest potential? Are you pushing it when you need to? Are you crafting detailed and insightful questions to substantial improvements in understanding or writing? I'm reading directly from here. And then we've got critical analysis. Now, AI is constantly telling me things that are not true or they're sort of true. Or when I click through the front to the source that it gave me, this happened this morning. I asked it for information on an idiom, and then I went through to the source, and the idiom was nowhere to be found on the link that AI gave me. We've got to be really critical when we consume AI produced content because it makes a lot of mistakes. There's also ethical considerations. That's basically how much of did you hand over too much of the work to AI? And then use of the prompting strategies. You as the teacher are going to decide which prompting strategies, how much you care. Someone made the point earlier that student wise prompt, maybe it wasn't that bad because who knows what they said later on. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. If you grade it holistically, you can take all of that into account. And maybe one prompt on its own isn't perfect, but the whole transcript as a piece of writing actually is. So this rubric I found to be very effective. I made this boilerplate on purpose so that people um, could tweak it for you again for your content, your discipline, your objective, whatever it may be. And it will change depending on what the actual objective is. Now I'm going to show you some student artifacts now when I actually graded their chat transcripts. The first case study, as I've said a couple times, I let them use ChatGPT as a brainstorming partner when we finished reading Romeo and Juliet. They had a broad menu of project-based learning choices. I purposely made the menu very broad, and I purposely made some of the projects fairly ambiguous so that I wanted them to have questions. I wanted them to be a little bit confused so that they would then go to AI and use it as a brainstorming partner to break down the project objective itself, figure out what to do. I did give them a practice round beforehand, but I'm going to move on for time's sake and show you another example. This is, and by the way, I am going to show you some of the student artifacts where kids did not understand it very well. But this is an example of a student using what's known as the persona pattern, which I taught them beforehand, where you can see he is putting AI into the role of a professional historian. You are a professional historian. Generate 5 ideas of different time periods the story of Romeo and Juliet could have occurred in. By the way, I didn't give you the context. These are freshmen in high school. For each of these time periods, identify what themes and ideas from the story would have been different. Give 3 examples of details. For each of the 3 details, provide an explanation for why. Ooh, I love that. He is not just asking AI for ideas. He's also asking AI to justify those ideas. Why do you think Romeo and Juliet would be interesting in ancient Egypt? Why would it be interesting in the Roaring Twenties? Don't just give me an answer. Explain to me, ChatGPT, why you're giving me these suggestions. Now, later on in his chat, and I'm going to ask you guys what you think here. He's iterating. This is the same chat, same kid, and he says, expand upon the idea of changing the scene to the Roaring Twenties. With cultural differences in mind, provide 5 examples of how the plot would change in the time period. Use specific details from the book and detail how they would change with the new culture. In your opinion, what is effective or ineffective about this iteration? Maybe you think it's too much, maybe it's not necessary. But if you do think there's something effective, I'd love for people to flood the chat with your ideas. Yeah, absolutely. Taking it a step further, it can lead to the answer that you actually need. Yep, Lisa made the point that he's narrowing it here, right? It's not just, okay, I got the idea of roll 20s. Now give me more information that I can use. By the way, I see from earlier some folks saying that they tell students that guy is like a friend or a summer intern. I think those analogies are great. I like to say also a brilliant intern. Kind of like, this person comes in, they're smart, but they don't know anything about what you're trying to achieve. They don't have any experience. They don't have any expertise. They're just really smart. So that means you got to give them a ton of context if you actually want to get them to um, give you the answer you want. Another analogy that I use, and I heard this recently, and I think it's really good, and it's really good for critical review of AI, um, is it's kind of like the family member, when your family gets together for dinner in America, it would like be for Thanksgiving dinner, for a holiday dinner or something like that, and you got that one family member who seems to know everything about everything, right? They speak very confidently. They're very articulate. They seem to have an answer for everything. But you know that you're a human being, and we have evolved to the point of knowing that when someone speaks really, really confidently, they might not know everything, especially someone who's talking about a variety of different topics. And so we have not evolved to the point of looking at digitally produced language and recognizing that it's kind of like that uncle at Thanksgiving dinner, but we need to. We really, really need to. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I want the students to understand you got to be really, really critical. You got to think about what this is producing and why. Um, yeah, I see how a lot of people are talking about conversing. Gretchen, this student has replay, and they're trying to figure out how to put it in a different context and essentially rewrite it for a different setting and time period. So I appreciate the conversation here. Yeah, Gretchen, we're going to get to that in the reflection section. Okay, here are some here are some not great examples from the same project. Student just asked, what are the main boring parts in the book? We had another student who tried to do the persona pattern, but he didn't really understand the nature of it. Instead of asking ChatGPT to be an expert, he said, "You are a ninth grade student." Um, so that's a perfect example where you can. I gave feedback to this student. I love that you tried to give this really thoughtful prompt, but you actually want to make ChatGPT the expert, make it a playwright, right? If you're trying to rewrite the play, you are a playwright. Um, Looks like there we go. Okay, another case study, another version of this. I had my students interview a Holden Caulfield personality-based chatbot after we finished reading the book The Catcher in the Rye. If you don't know, Holden is the main character in Catcher in the Rye. This was a little bit different because they weren't using an assistant. They were using a personality bot, and that's why I wanted to walk through this example. It's a very different project. So in this case, instead of asking them to use prompt engineering strategies, I actually just wanted them to show active listening and empathy. Because talking to a character bot, specifically a character bot who is very depressed, if you know this book, you know this well. Holden is borderline suicidal. Really, really intense stuff. And now they're going to go talk to this bot. And now if you're saying to yourself, that sounds really risky, remember, I am monitoring these chats. I'm seeing everything that they're doing, and they know that. And I'm saying, okay, show me active listening, show me empathy, show me maturity, and I give them a rubric for how to do that, and I give them strategies for how to do that. Now, here's an example of one of my students. Oh, let me go back. How do I go back? Shoot. Sorry. Give me 1 second. Sorry, everybody. Technical difficulties. Almost there. Okay. Right. This is an example of one of my students who actually showed quite a bit of a maturity. Holden, the chatbot, um, consistently expressed not feeling good about himself. In this chat, you can see at the top, he's talking about how this girl that he likes isn't going to like him back. He says the other guy's bigger and stronger and better looking than I am. But you can see at the bottom, this is a 14, 15-year-old boy who says back to the bot, he says, no, you have more than that. You have to think about the positives and not the negatives. So this was an example of my student understanding the objective and engaging in the chat in a way that actually allowed me to have these very, very meaningful conversations about emotions and our socio-emotional journey. Now, on the flip side, I had some students who just started messing with the bot. And if you've put AI in front of students before, you've probably seen this. Students like to try and mess with AI. And if you know about Holden Caulfield, he calls everybody phony. And what you see here is my student calling Holden phony on purpose to try and rile him up, try to make him angry. He even says, "Do it then, phony." He's basically bullying his bot. Now, keep in mind, this student knows that I'm going to see this. So it is, he's not totally serious about it. But I'm curious, if this type of situation happened and you were grading a chat, how would you handle this with your student? As some folks maybe think about what you might do in this situation, I'm going to answer some of the Q&As that I got here. Mike asked if I explained how LLMs work and why they have the limitations they have. Yes, to an extent. I teach them and I give them information about predictive analytics and the fact that it's a neural network and it's not an algorithm, and that and I use a lot of analogies at my level for high school students. I use a lot of analogies and examples to help them understand. So I would say they have a basic general sense, but they don't know a ton about what's going on underneath the hood. Haley has a really good question. She's asking, on top of giving the students feedback, do I also evaluate the AI's output? Yes, to an extent. I'm basically asking them to be thoughtful about it themselves. But and ultimately, I tell them you are uh, responsible for what you put in the final output, right? So if AI makes a mistake, AI makes a mistake. That's not my job. Your job is to make sure mistakes don't end up in the final product. And if they do, I'm not going to like hammer you for that, but I'm going to say, hey, I think you let some negative information come in here. Okay. So what I did here, just to kind of close the loop on this, is I use this as an opportunity to go to my student and say, hey, I know you're just messing with the bot, but let's not make a habit out of this, right? Let's not, I know you're just joking, you're a teenage boy, and maybe it's not, you're just trying to have some fun, but let's not make a habit out of this. So that was an opportunity to have a socio-emotional conversation with my student that I wouldn't be able to if I hadn't looked at the chat and if I hadn't seen the way this interaction went down. So in that way, it can be a really powerful tool. Okay, step four, if students complete the traditional output like a presentation or an essay or a lab report, what you're going to do in this assessment framework is you are going to decrease the value of the additional output. And the reason for that is if you give them parameters that you can use AI for 30 minutes and then you're going to submit the chat transcript to me, they might continue using it outside of class in ways that you are not monitoring or evaluating. That's it for me, in my opinion, that's okay, right? I'm grading your chat transcript. I'm going to be able to give you feedback on your AI use. If you use it outside of class, okay, that's fine. But as a result, since I know you're getting a lot of help from this AI tutor, I'm going to decrease the value of that essay that I normally would grade. Still going to grade it, still going to look at it, but I'm going to put a lot more emphasis on the chat transcript itself. And then I have verbal presentation up here as well. What I did is when students finished their project, I would say, okay, I want you to go up in front of the class and you guys are going to verbally explain the thrust of your project, but you have 3 minutes. That's it. No notes. I want you to just verbally explain it to me. And that really tells you how well they understood it. If they can explain it verbally, just the basics, don't have to go in depth, don't need a PowerPoint, just tell me the gist. That's going to give you a really good sense of whether or not they leaned heavily on AI or whether or not they understood it when they used AI. Step five is a really interesting piece. It's called the AI reflection, and this connects back to the purpose statement. The purpose statement is like a hypothesis, right? You're guessing whether or not AI is going to be useful. It might not be. You might use it for brainstorming, and you might find that it was more of a hassle than it was actually a help. And that's okay. And at the end, that's going to be a really powerful realization for the student if they ask themselves, what, why, and how. What did AI suggest to me that I should do in the context of my objective? What did I accept from AI and what did I not accept? Why did AI make these particular suggestions? Now, if I forgot to ask in the middle of the chat, why are you telling me this? That's okay. The student can go back to the chat transcript and analyze AI's answers and try to figure out what was AI's goal? Why did AI think this was a good idea? Also, why did I accept or not accept certain parts of the AI's recommendations? And how did AI use impact the overall product, the overall output? These questions require a really deep metacognitive approach as you use AI, and they force you to really think, how effective was this? And if I use it again in the future, can I make it more effective? Or maybe I don't want to use it for that, right? We're only going to get to these answers by actually experimenting with them. And I think at some point kids are going to be using them anyway. So this is if they're going to use them anyway, let's do it in a monitoring way where we're evaluating and asking them to reflect. I have a rubric here as well for the what, why, how approach, the AI reflection, broken down into clarification and verification of what AI is producing, understanding of AI suggestions, why did it make those suggestions, impact analysis, and adaptive questioning. Also very boilerplate for folks who want to edit this for their own particular use. Really quick, reflection examples. This is from the Holden Project. In this blue box right here, we have a student who concluded that talking to Holden AI was not effective. It wasn't useful. They wouldn't do it again. For me, that's fine, right? I want my students to talk to each other. I don't want them to fall victim to character-based chatbots. I do want them to try them out and make their own conclusions, but it's fine by me to say AI is not effective. This student in the red sort of drew a conclusion that's in the middle. And I love that he uses the analogy of poker game because working with AI is very much an abstract engagement process. It's a little like playing poker. You don't know what's going on all the time, and you don't know if things are going to work, and you don't know if your bet's going to work. And he says if you play your cards with Holden, you can have a conversation that's both effective and accurate. And he also said it's important to keep in mind that AI responses and experiences will vary from user to user. So he understands that, hey, if I didn't say the right thing, I might not have had a good conversation with Holden. And then this last one, I thought this was very interesting. The student said the chatbot was just similar enough to Holden from the book to be reliable, but also just different enough from Holden in the book to give me insight into how he felt. So some really deep, thoughtful things here. Okay. You might be asking yourself, really quickly, Lale, how am I doing on time?
5 minutes.
Okay, I'll go quickly through here. You might be saying to yourself, who has the time for all this? I've got a million other things to do. I would point out number one, grading a chat transcript in terms of time, effort, and amount of grading time is actually the same essentially as grading an essay. Also, give them specific parameters. Don't let them submit a 100-page chat transcript. Say to them, you've got 10 prompts and iterations, and that's it. I'm going to cut it off at the point. And I'm going to look at your chat up to that point and grade it up to that point. Additionally, for those traditional outputs, focus on verbal presentations. Because AI is out there and our students are using them outside of class, it's gonna be hard to rely on those traditional assessments. Focus on verbal presentations to determine whether or not your students actually understood the objective, the task, and the content. And if you're feeling like this whole framework is a little bit too much, what I would suggest is um, I had 5 steps. Maybe for the first time that you try this, only do 1 or 2 aspects of the framework and just look at the chats, but don't grade them. Just look at them as if you were grading them and consider if I was grading, how might I have handled this situation? That type of experiment, I think, is going to show you a lot about how your students go through the process of producing an essay or a presentation or whatever the traditional output is. Additionally, there's more good news, or there is news. Many of the developers that are creating ed tech tools like Conmigo, School AI, Magic School AI, not only they do 2 things right now. They offer you immediate visibility into your student chats, so you can do a couple of things. You can provide real-time feedback, or you have that chat transcript that just lives on the system. And if you want to go in and give them feedback, or you want to submit some feedback other ways. When I did it, they had to copy and paste the entire chat in a Word document and send it to me. But now we've got immediate visibility into the chats. So don't just evaluate the output and go, no, evaluate what they're actually saying to AI. Give that a shot, see how it goes. Um, okay, this is where I sort of go my sales pitch. If you're interested in this, I'm putting together what I call Teaching Effective AI Use program, where I want to put together a cohort of interested educators who want to experiment with this, but they want to collaborate and they want some coaching. And my plan is to bring together some friends that I know that have been working on this as well. And we're going to provide some coaching and we're going to collaborate together. We're going to share data. We're going to design assessments together and ultimately get some data. Some things are going to work, some things are not. That's fine. Let's just find out. I also am offering pilot programs if you want to input it at your school or in your department. And if you are wondering how to get involved, I leave my information up here. Someone pointed out, yes, there are a few articles on my blog that are for paid users only, but the majority is free, and you can also reach out to me there. I will stop here. You can sign up for that program on my website or shoot me an email.
Fantastic. Mike, thank you so much for this information. Just a reminder for everyone, the recording of this presentation will be shared over email next week. Please feel free to connect with Mike on his blog. There is a lot of resources on AI or not AI related to teaching, or add him on LinkedIn and you can answer more questions there. I encourage folks to join us for the last round of presentations starting in 15 minutes. Go back to the agenda link of the summit homepage and you can and you can choose a workshop from there. Mike, thank you so much for this fantastic information. And if folks want to stick around and answer some questions, feel free to do so. Mike will be here for a few more minutes, or you can jump in the next session. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you, everyone. I'll be here for a couple minutes if you want to chat. Yeah, Bill, I think, let me see if I can unmute you.
Yeah, I would like to know. I was with you until you got to the point about you had to do the verbal, because a lot of times I'm teaching online students.
Mm,
So how do I apply this to
yeah,
an online situation?
that's a tough one. Well, I still think the principle of sort of decreasing the value of the traditional assessment applies in an online situation. So you can still grade the chat. You can, and then they turn in. Do you mind me asking what you teach or what type of assessment you're thinking of?
I teach in history, and a lot of times I'm looking for them to understand causation and motives and those kinds of things.
And so producing essays, presentations.
Essays, I use a lot of discussion as well, where they're trying to analyze and compare with each other what happened, what they think about it, and then critique each other as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I mean, other than just saying, listen, let's saying to your students, listen, I'm gonna allow you to use AI. I'm gonna grade the chat transcript. Um, and I know you're probably going to use it on your own outside of those parameters, uh, and then saying, so as a result, I'm still going to grade the final essay, but I'm just going to decrease it a little bit because with AI help, I'm more interested in your critical thinking in the chat. Outside of that, to be honest, I'm not sure what else you might do on the online setting. You could still do the verbal, I guess, if you're on Zoom like we're doing now, but of course
Right,
they could just have a transcript right up on their screen.
right. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, 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 Elena.
I just want to reply to what Bill, his question, the way we addressed that. We, in our description for a synchronous class, we ask them, we have a disclaimer when this says, okay, I use the AI and this is what I've done and this is what I've learned from it. So we encourage them to be transparent, but share with us what is the teaching moment from that experience. And that's kind of how we address that, encourage them to use it, but be transparent about it.
Yeah, I agree. It's a similar thing. I think what this does is like I know a lot of people are talking about citing AI use and saying I used AI for X, Y, or Z. And I think I love that piece. I think this is just one step further where it's like, okay, not only are you citing AI use, but you're showing what actually happened so that I can evaluate it and understand exactly what you used it for.
I mean, for us, it's more like critically evaluating the content, which demonstrates then, they're using some knowledge. You know what I mean? So they're not gullible. And
Right.
that's what we're trying to bring forward, is that evidence of using what they've learned in a course to compare to what they got from the ChatGPT or whatever AI tool, make, intelligent comparison and move forward.
I love that. Yeah. This started for me from the exact same place. I don't want my students to lose the ability to think for themselves and think critically. That's where it started. And there are some pieces where I'm like, oh, they can actually leverage it too. So I need to do both at the same time, that critical review and the leverage at the same time.
So first of all, we put it in the syllabi, and then we put those are the requirements, and this is the format. So we kind of, brought it forward right away in a, onset of the course. So they're not surprised. And we did tell them then, turn it in, checks for AI, so we will know, things like that. It's not a very good efficacy tool, whatever, but at least we said, yes, you don't do it, but we can see it, you use it, so better be honest about it. So, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, okay, Arthur, go ahead.
Thank you very much for the presentation, Mike. I thought it was very useful. I'm very much an AI fan, so appreciate your view of this and how you approach the teaching. It's excellent. I don't do a writing intensive course, but I do teach a class where I have an opportunity to teach students about negotiations. And one of the things that I was really interested about is using AI in that mode. And I like the way you created, the avatar of Holden. But I was wondering, and I may have missed it when you were speaking about it, was the tool you used for that, did you have them use Chat GPT or did you use something else there?
You use Character AI. Are you familiar with that platform?
I am familiar with it, but I've never used it.
Yeah, it's if you're familiar with it, you probably already know, but it's basically personality-based bots. So you can talk to Superman, you can talk to, a celebrity, and so they have fictional characters as well. You can also generate your own bot. I didn't do that. I found a Holden Caulfield one it was okay. I mean, fine that it was okay because I wanted them to evaluate the effectiveness of the bot. But yeah, I use Character AI.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that.
Yep. Kaylee. You there, Kaylee?
Can you hear?
Oh, I can, yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I know you probably got to go, so I wanted to say thank you for this. It was very informative, lots of practical tools. And I think the gentleman who just spoke sort of asked a question. I was wondering if you do use ChatGPT with your students much, or do you prefer other AI tools like that character AI when you're doing literary kinds of assignments? What tools do you recommend?
So yeah, I've only really used three. So, something I probably should have said during the presentation is that I don't view this as something that you do like all the time. It's more
Right.
like a big assessment, at the end of a unit. They've already got some main expertise, so they can evaluate what AI produces. Um, so to get to your question, I've used Character AI, I've used ChatGPT, and then the only other one is a sort of a unique platform. It's called Engage for Education. It's an open source platform. Just a guy I know who's building an open source platform.
Oh, cool.
That I haven't. Yeah, it's a really cool. He made this thing called the adversary that purposely produces inaccurate information. Lana, you might appreciate this. And so you put it in front of your student almost as a game, and you go, all right, like, this is a supposed expert. For me, I did Chinese mythology, and the kids had to chat with it to find out more about Chinese mythology, but then they also had to call it out if they felt that the bot was producing inaccurate information, which it was. So.
Okay, I like that. Did the students respond well to that? Did they enjoy getting to be the experts and correct it?
They were confused at first. It took them a couple of minutes, 5 or 10 minutes, but then they kind of caught on and they were like, "Oh, I get it." And I also programmed it to give a virtual reward if the kid called them out and it was lying. Um, and so like once they started getting those they thought it was funny and it led to some engagements. That was good.
Hey, interesting. Well, thank you so much. I'm working on experimenting with creating custom GPTs that could perhaps be used by my students and have certain parameters already programmed in place to encourage, like, this is how you should use it. But at this point, I've not yet actually introduced any AI use to my students. So I've still been on the fence about leaping in, even as I've been experimenting and studying a lot. So this was really helpful. Thank you.
Good. I'm glad you appreciate it. Yeah, sounds good.
All right, take care.
Yeah, Brian. All right. Hey, Brian, do you have a question? Sabrina, sent a message, so I'll just answer it verbally. I'm not sure. I'll type it as well, but I had to have them copy and paste the chat transcripts. Sabrina was asking, how do you actually monitor? I had to have them copy and paste, which was, to be honest, a pain. But the newer generation ed tech tools offer you immediate visibility into your students' chats. Some Conmigo is particularly good with this. School AI is very good with this. You can develop your own bot on School AI so that you are the one who programmed it essentially, and you put it out there and you can see how they interact with it yourself. Mike, you got to have an interesting question. Mike said, can we assume that the way generative AI responds to conversations will not change in the future and that the way students learn to use it now will still be useful in the future? Really good question. Presumably, it's going to get better. Presumably, you won't need to necessarily give as much context as you do now. I guess. I don't know. That's what people are saying, but people are wrong a lot. So, the way I'm thinking about this is what's relevant here is okay, the way I teach them today might change next year, but that's the same as the way I teach essays changes as I learn more about essay writing. So in other words, like changing the way we teach principles of effective AI use is not a non-starter for doing this. It's actually more reason to do it now. Um, Give them feedback now, and then as things develop, they will just be adding a little bit of understanding, and they'll have a really good foundation. But I think there's always a role for the teacher now to teach students how to have effective and responsible, thoughtful interactions with AI. I think that's no matter how good AI gets, we'll always need human beings to teach people how to use it the right way. Brian, I don't know if you can see, but I clicked the unmute button. You should be able to unmute. Um, It looks like Brian's question is there an encyclopedia of highly effective prompts to generate various desired products? This is a good question because it goes back to what I said earlier about AI literacy being a reading and writing skill. And what I mean by that is it is a abstract gray area type of skill. It's does not lend itself to scientific frameworks or rules-based interactions, which makes making a rubric for a chat transcript really hard. You have to be flexible, a lot like an essay. There are a million ways to write a good essay, and there are a million ways to have a good chat transcript. And so this approach requires a lot of flexibility. It's a lot like teaching writing. It's really very, very similar to teaching writing. And so if you have experience teaching specifically writing, this is going to be very intuitive for you. I think people really want there to be sort of this encyclopedia where it's just like, just give me the prompt. I can just put it in and it'll just like do the thing I want it to do. Right now, it's not that way. Personally, I don't think it'll ever be that way. It will always require, in my opinion, it will always require creativity. It will always require the ability to organize information in a concise and succinct way. It will always require good communication skills. If you're not a good communicator, you're not going to be good at using large language models. And so that's why we really need to, people are talking so much about emphasizing the humanities going forward. People need to learn to read and write again because that's how large language models work. So I don't know if you can hear me, but I hope that answered your question. All right. Well, it looks like I think oh, I didn't realize the chat was, oh, okay. Sorry, I was looking at something else. I think we are done. Um, John, do you have any advice on how to, should I just close out or? Okay. All right. If you have any more questions, just reach out to me, LinkedIn, email, however you need to. And I appreciate you all being here and engaging and asking great questions. Thank you for engaging and hope to see you out there.